Have you ever heard of a demon that whispers your name until you lose your mind? A lot of people believe that when a demon possesses someone, one of three things happens. Either it drives that person insane, or it takes their life directly, or it wears them down so slowly, so completely, that the person ends up taking their own life just to make the torment stop. Some people think all of this is just superstition. A myth. Something old folks made up to explain things they didn't understand. But plenty of others have lived through something they can't explain away so easily. If you're someone who doesn't believe in this stuff, today's story might change your mind. Because this is the kind of story that makes you believe evil is real, and that it should never be taken lightly. Let's get into it. Hey, and welcome back, everyone. Dave is from a small town outside Knoxville, Tennessee, and he told us about a man from his town. I'll get to what happened to that man in a moment, but first, let me tell you his name. His name was Frank. Frank was, by all accounts, a completely normal guy. But over the last few months of his life, people in town started noticing something off about him. He looked strange. Confused, almost. Usually, when Frank walked through town, he'd stop and talk to everybody. He was friendly, easygoing. But lately, people said it looked like he was talking to himself. Muttering. Day by day, he seemed to be getting weaker, thinner, more worn down. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with him. Eventually, one of his friends worked up the nerve to ask him directly, was something going on? Was there some kind of trouble in his life? Frank opened up, a little. First, he mentioned some conflict going on in his family. I'll get into that in a bit. But then he said something strange. Something that unsettled his friend more than any family drama could. Frank said he kept hearing a woman's voice, whispering his name in his ear. In this low, almost seductive tone. And it was driving him out of his mind. He was constantly on edge, jumpy, terrified. When he tried to sleep, when he woke up, even when he was just trying to get through the day, the voice kept coming back. Over and over. Frank had no idea what was happening to it. He tried everything. At night, when he tried to sleep, the voice would still echo in his ears. He started stuffing cotton in his ears, pressing his fingers against them, wrapping a pillow around his head, anything to block the sound out. Nothing worked. Something had happened to Frank that he never could have predicted. At first, the voice only said his name. But as the weeks passed and Frank grew weaker, he noticed something else. The voice was changing. It wasn't just saying his name anymore. He went to doctors. He tried home remedies, sleep aids, anything that might knock him out at night and give him some peace. Nothing helped. Watching, people said it really did look like he was suffering from something far beyond ordinary illness. But at that point, Frank still didn't understand what was actually behind it. As time went on, the voice started saying more. It told him, "Run all you want. I will never leave you alone. I'm going to torment you. I'm going to drive you insane. That's my purpose, and that's exactly why I'm here." Frank still had no idea how to make it stop, or how to get free of whatever this was. So he started asking around town, hoping someone, anyone, could help him. Nobody had an answer. Eventually some friends suggested he visit a local exorcist, a man who claimed to deal with spirits and curses. But before I get to that, let me back up and tell you about Frank's family, because it matters. It might give you a sense of why this all started in the first place. Dave told us Frank was an older man, around 50. He'd never married. His parents had already passed away. But he had a younger brother named Andrew, who was married with kids. The two brothers still lived together on the family property, and they had never formally split their land. Then, not long before all this started, Frank found out something, and it changed everything. He arranged to divide the land between himself and Andrew. At first, Andrew thought nothing of it. He figured it made sense, they were both getting older, Andrew had a family now, it seemed like the right time to divide things up fairly. But Andrew had no idea what Frank's real motive was. The land got split. Shortly after, a new highway project was announced, and it cut straight through the property. All the compensation money from the state, all of it, went to Frank. Because Frank had made sure of something ahead of time, he'd quietly found out, through some contacts, exactly where that highway was going to run. And right before the land was divided, he made sure the portion that intersected the highway route stayed entirely in his name. He gave Andrew a larger piece of land overall, but Andrew's land had no value. No highway money. Nothing. Frank, meanwhile, made a fortune. Between the state payout and the sudden jump in land value near the new highway, his portion was worth 4 or 5 times what it had been. For a while, Andrew didn't put it together. He thought it was just a coincidence, The land split happening right before the highway project. But word travels in a small town, and eventually people who knew the local officials Frank had been talking to let it slip. Andrew found out the truth. His own brother had cheated him out of what should have rightfully been half his. The two brothers started fighting constantly. Screaming matches, insults, the whole thing. They still lived under the same roof, but they stopped speaking to each other completely. Things kept getting worse and worse between them. About 2 to 2.5 months after Andrew found out the truth, that's when Frank started hearing the voice. The situation with the brothers didn't improve. If anything, it got worse, more bitter. And Frank, meanwhile, was falling apart. He looked thinner every week, more hollow. When friends finally convinced him to see the local exorcist, the man told him something chilling. Someone had sent a spirit after him. A vengeful, seductive female spirit, the kind old folklore calls a whispering woman, and that's why all of this was happening to him. If you've been following along, you might already have a guess about who was behind it. But let me tell you exactly how it happened, and why things got so bad. Frank's condition kept declining. The exorcist who diagnosed him also gave him certain items, things to burn at home, things to eat before bed as a kind of ritual protection. Frank did everything he was told. But it didn't help. If anything, it got worse. Now he started feeling a presence in his own house. Beyond Andrew, Andrew's wife, and their kids, he felt like someone else was there too. Someone moving around his room at night. He kept hearing whispers, footsteps running through his room, and it didn't stop there. He said he could hear the sound of bangles jingling, like someone wearing them was moving around him. He started having dreams of a woman in a long red dress. The situation kept spiraling. The harder Frank tried to find a way out of it, the worse things got. Dave said that by that point, Frank looked like a man who had completely lost his mind. He would run through the house, through the streets, hands clamped over his ears, trying to escape a sound that was already inside his head. The voice never stopped. Run all you want. I'm not leaving. I'm here, and this is why I came. There was no cure for what Frank was going through. And after 6 or 7 months of barely holding on, Frank took his own life. He hanged himself in his own bedroom. It devastated the whole town. But everyone assumed the obvious explanation, that Frank's mental health had simply broken down. Nobody suspected black magic or curses. They thought it was some kind of psychological collapse, and that in his despair, he'd taken his own life. But the real truth? Only Andrew and his wife knew it. A couple of months after Frank's death, the truth came out, to Dave's father, specifically. Dave's dad and Andrew had been close friends for years, the kind of friends who'd have a drink together every so often. One evening, not long after Frank's passing, the two of them sat down together, and Andrew started crying. Not just a little, he broke down completely. At first, Dave's father assumed it was simple grief. He figured Andrew was finally letting himself mourn his brother, now that some time had passed. But it wasn't just grief. After a while, Andrew started talking, and he told Dave's father everything. He said he deeply regretted what happened to his brother. He said that in the moment, his anger had blinded him so completely that he couldn't see what he was actually doing. Andrew explained that the fighting between him and Frank had never really stopped. But one particular night, things went too far. Frank had been out drinking, and when he came home, all the resentment that had built up over the months, he unloaded it all onto Andrew. He beat him. Andrew was the younger brother, so he'd never had it in him to fight back, to raise a hand against Frank. But Frank held nothing back that night. That was the moment Andrew and his wife couldn't take any more. After that beating, they decided they were going to do something about Frank, something that would make sure he could never hurt them again. They started reaching out to local occultists, hoping to find someone who could put a curse on Frank. Eventually, they found one. And this particular man told them he could do something to Frank that would slowly destroy his mental state, until eventually, Frank would harm himself. And that's exactly what happened. Andrew told Dave's father the man claimed to control a vengeful female spirit, and that if they paid him enough, he would send it after Frank. All he needed was something that belonged to Frank, a piece of his clothing. Andrew said this had been a subject of ugly arguments between him and his wife even before that. Frank was still his brother, after all, and some part of him never wanted to actually hurt him, not after everything they'd already been through when Frank betrayed him over the land. He'd even snapped at his wife for suggesting it. But after that night, after the beating, something in him broke. He and his wife went back to the occultist, this time bringing a piece of Frank's clothing with them. The man performed his ritual. And soon after, that's when the whispering started for Frank. From there, Frank grew weaker and weaker, week after week, until his mental state deteriorated completely, and eventually, He took his own life. Dave said his father is the only person who knows the real story. Andrew trusted him enough to tell him the truth. But they never let it spread through the rest of the town, because they didn't want people looking at them differently, or blaming them, or treating them the way people treat someone once they know what they did. At the same time, Dave felt like this story needed to be told. People should know that the kind of harm described here often comes from someone close to you, someone you'd never expect. And if you ever start feeling like something is deeply wrong, if strange things start happening to you that no doctor can explain, it's worth paying attention to what's really going on around you. Dave gave us fake names for everyone involved. Frank and Andrew aren't their real names. The people this actually happened to asked to stay anonymous, just in case this story ever reached someone who might recognize them. That's the story. I hope it gave you something to think about, and honestly, I hope nothing like this ever happens to anyone listening.